Imagine standing in the middle of the arid African savanna roughly 3 million years ago. The wind carries the scent of dry grass, red dust, and absolute danger. In this world, our ancestors were not the rulers. They were small, slow, without sharp claws, without thick hides, and completely devoid of venom. They were prey. Every passing day was an endless flight from saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, and predatory phantoms lurking in the brush. From a purely biological perspective, human existence at that time was a fragile miracle. We were born to be food in a ruthless world. But then, something happened. A moment seemingly so insignificant, silent, and entirely unrecorded in any chronicle, yet it permanently reshaped the trajectory of life on Earth. A hairy hand, with fingers accustomed only to clinging to branches, reached out and picked up a stone, not by accident, not to throw it away in a panic, but as a conscious choice. That hand gripped the stone, felt its weight, the roughness of its surface, and in a brilliant flash of realization, that lifeless rock was no longer just a piece of the ground. It became an extension of the human body. The strange truth is that animals also use tools. Chimpanzees use twigs to catch ants, otters use rocks to smash clamshells, and crows can bend wire. But there is an invisible and massive boundary between using an existing object and transforming it to serve a purpose beyond basic survival instincts. Our ancestors did not just pick up a stone, they struck it against another stone. The sharp crack of two mineral blocks colliding, echoing across the quiet savanna, was the death knell for the entire primitive ecosystem. When the first stone broke apart, revealing razor-sharp edges, it was no longer a stone. It was technology. It was humanity's very first blade. Have you ever wondered what went through the mind of that small creature when they saw a sharp cut that their fingernails could never produce? Put yourself in their place. Before this, you could only eat the leftover scraps left behind by other predators. You could not tear through the thick hide of a mammoth or a rhinoceros. You were powerless against the nutrient-dense bone marrow encased in shells as hard as steel. But with a sharp-edged piece of flint, the entire world suddenly swung wide open. That stone blade severed tendons, stripped away thick hides, and shattered massive bones. Suddenly, humans had access to the most massive source of energy on the plains. And it was that very energy from bone marrow and red meat that fueled a highly energy-consuming organ, our brain. The sharp stone fed the brain, and the growing brain began to think about how to make that stone sharper, more dangerous. An eternal feedback loop was established, but breaking a stone to create a sharp edge was only the beginning. A tool used to cut the meat of a dead animal is completely different from a weapon used to take the life of a living one. How did we cross that boundary? How did we transition from dissecting corpses to actively hunting? This process was agonizingly slow and required a massive cognitive evolution. You see, to create a true weapon, you cannot just strike a rock randomly. You must be able to see the shape of that weapon hidden within the amorphous block of stone before you even touch it. This is what psychology calls projective capacity. Our ancestors began crafting beautiful teardrop-shaped handaxes with perfect symmetry. They were not just creating sharpness, they were imposing geometric order onto the chaos of nature. But a stone handaxe, no matter how sharp, still requires you to get dangerously close to your prey. And walking up to a wild beast weighing hundreds of kilograms, armed with a barricade of sharp horns, has never been a good idea. Humans were still far too weak in close-quarters combat. The solution to this problem was one of the most lethal turning points in natural history: the concept of the ranged attack. Try to imagine the bewilderment of other animals when this happened. For eons, the law of the jungle had been simple. If an animal cannot touch you, it cannot hurt you. Physical distance equaled safety. But humans broke that biological law. By combining a sharp piece of stone with a long wooden branch and using vines or animal sinew to bind them together, humans created the spear. The invention of projectile weapons was not just about piecing parts together. It represented a profound understanding of physics and dynamics, even without a single written equation. It required the brain to calculate flight trajectories, gravity, wind speed, and the future movement of the prey. You do not throw a spear at where the animal is standing. You must throw it at where the animal is going to be. The human mind had begun to travel a few seconds into the future to execute a life-or-death judgment. Our bodies also began to change to accommodate this new weapon. The human shoulder joint evolved bizarrely, shifting backward, allowing the arm to store elastic energy like a giant slingshot. The hips, abdominal muscles, and long legs worked in unison to transfer a terrifying torsional force from the ground to the fingertips. We became the only creature on this planet capable of throwing an object with high speed and absolute precision. Suddenly, distance was no longer a safe shield for the rest of the animal kingdom. For the first time in history, humans could take the life of a massive creature from dozens of meters away. This power was so immense that it was intoxicating. A group of frail humans, unarmed, would be torn to shreds in the blink of an eye. But with stone-tipped spears, they could surround, exhaust, and ultimately bring down any creature, no matter its size. From the position of scavengers licking off leftover scraps, humans rose to become the most ruthless apex predators the Earth had ever seen. But the most profound change did not happen on the outside. It happened on the inside. When humans picked up that weapon, they began to view the world through an entirely different lens. The surrounding environment was no longer a perilous place to hide from. It became a treasure trove of resources waiting to be exploited. Animals were no longer terrifying monsters. They became targets. They became the prize. The concept of absolute dominance began to take root in the mind. The possession of weapons also changed how humans interacted with their own kind. Once you know how to pierce the hide of a bear, you also know exactly what that spear can do to the body of another human. The presence of weaponry demanded an unprecedented level of social control and trust. Tribes had to develop more complex languages, stricter codes of conduct, and deeper religious beliefs to ensure that this deadly technology did not turn back and destroy them. Paradoxically, the very tool created for killing was what forced human society to become more tightly knit and internally peaceful. Reflect on the weight of that first stone. It did not just take the lives of innocent beasts. It took away the innocence of our own species. By forging weapons, humans single-handedly removed themselves from the natural cycle. We were no longer playing by Mother Nature's rules. We were writing our own. Every time a sharp stone point pierced flesh, it was not merely a victory of survival, but a declaration of sovereignty. From those carefully chipped, rough pieces of flint, we have traveled a long road to reach copper, iron, steel, gunpowder, and ultimately, nuclear warheads capable of incinerating the entire planet. The level of sophistication may have changed, but the core of the action remains the same. We are still throwing stones into the dark, trying to assert our existence and protect our own fragile safety. And now, when looking at those ancient flint fragments resting silently in museum glass cases, we are not just looking at primitive tools. We are looking at objects that contain the entirety of human nature. It is magnificent creativity and horrifying destruction. It is transcendent intelligence and the deepest of fears. The next time you take a walk and accidentally kick a small stone on the path, pause for a second. Look at its lifeless, cold, and rigid nature. That stone has been there long before we arrived, and it will remain there long after we are gone. But there was a magical moment in the endless stream of time when one of your fragile ancestors bent down, picked up an exact same object, and instead of accepting their fate to be eaten, decided to use it to change the entire world. That is not just the story of the origins of violence. It is the story of the moment humans realize that destiny is not something preordained by nature, but something that can be chipped away, shaped, and held firmly in our own two hands. And the shadow of that stone raised in the dawn of humanity, even today, still casts a long shadow over our civilization.